Good morning, ladies. After I did the most recent podcast, Travel Experiences Reimagined, I got quite a few people contacting me. And so there was a particular gal who is in her early 70s. We went through, and I'm looking at my cheat sheet today, we went through a little bit of a coaching to try to work through some of the issues, but clearly there's going to be other issues. Was born in Italy, stayed in Italy through the age of 8. Her parents moved here. She went back once, either 20 or 40 years ago. One of those two numbers, I can't remember. I think it was maybe 40. I'm not sure. And an interesting conversation, literally phobic of airplanes. So how do you get around that? So the first thing I have to say, disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, not a psychiatrist, not a nursemaid. I'm just a human who has complex PTSD myself for different reasons. And I have a few phobias, which are really a displacement of the trauma that I had. And obviously, I don't know the details of this person's story, but the trauma is psychologically severe for the flight. So we talked about things, and I just said, let's do a little exercise. Resolved or to be resolved or to be addressed. That's what it was. It's an A. It was an A, to be addressed. So I made like this Ben Franklin, and one of them says resolved. The other one is to be addressed. So we had a discussion, and knowing that the city and the country they're flying from to Rome does have direct flights. So that was first and foremost. It's resolved. It would be a direct flight. It would be a night flight of 9 to 10 hours, addressed. The other issue would be is whether it would be in and out of the same airport in Europe or whether it would be an open jaw. Because in this scenario, we're talking Paris, Normandy, and then coming down through Italy, meandering, with Rome being the most southern point. And although you can come on down, then you have to work your way all the way back up, which adds a level of fatigue to doing that. So an open jaw, flying into Paris and flying out of Rome, or flying into Rome and out of Paris, might be a consideration. It will be more expensive doing an open jaw, but it saves you a lot less time, and it might be easier, and it'll save you backtracking the transportation, the sleeping, and the eating just to get back up there. So that was a consideration. The other thing that was addressed was, I call it a soft landing. And I don't mean a landing like the plane is going to land smooth. It's from when you leave your door until you arrive in that other country. How can we make this whole transition a soft landing? Because that in itself can set people up. And I have seen people come in exhausted and fatigued and basically become emotionally unstable because it just was one more thing that triggered them that they hadn't expected. So by the time they arrive in Italy, sometimes they have a meltdown just upon arriving because they were carrying too much stress prior. And I have personally experienced that, of seeing that with others. And I've seen it even with myself. That's part of the reason why I do not take a train from the airport up to Spoleto anymore. I get a personal driver, because there's just too many things that could go wrong. The fatigue, the exhaust, oversleeping, getting robbed on the train, the trains being delayed. You just don't need any of that. I need a soft landing. And so we talked about business class and second class, and this individual felt that second class would be the way to go. But after we discussed this massive anxiety issue, and I mean massive phobia, that's not my recommending second class, unless you're buying a ticket for someone to accompany you, and you're buying someone to say, hey, I'll buy you a round trip ticket, but you got to come into the country and out of the country when I leave and be on the flight with me. Which you can't always, you can make sure the person shows up for the first flight, but you can't guarantee that person's going to show up for the second flight, and you're not traveling with them. So my feeling was business class in this case was going to be more important, because my recommendation was to go to the doctor and to get a stronger med, because they had talked about having taken a med for the plane, but the med wasn't strong enough to knock her out. And I would say, you need a med that's going to knock you out. You need to find out what's the appropriate time frame to take it. Make sure you've eaten enough. Get a first class or business class ticket. Buy some type of noise sounding that you don't hear noise, canceling earmuffs. I don't know what they call them. Those things you put on your ears that are comfortable enough. To get, I just wrote down, they should probably play music. That wouldn't hurt. I sometimes have to bring little bottles of essential oils in a nasal thing that I use to take away smells that provoke my complex PTSD or things like that. I used to have to carry them with me, but I've been pretty good for years and I don't carry that anymore. I do get really comfortable iPads. In the case of doing first class, I'm going to put a foot pillow, but the reality is if you're in first class, your feet is up and you've got the best chance of being knocked out. Yeah, that's my recommendation, is that that's going to have to be addressed, and that would be more of a professional. But what I can assist with is deciding on what you can put on the resolved list and then the to be addressed lists. And you start working on taking away each of the pieces to be addressed and making the decisions, and then you end up with more resolved. So for example, 3 months is what this person wants. Paris, Normandy, Cinque Terre, Florence, Milan, Rome. It's a very particular thing, very interesting client. She's been an antique historical clothing fashion designer, restoration person. And so she wants to go to all these places that match what her occupation has been and just wants to experience it. But we do need to figure out how we're going to set up the 3 months. Because like I said, what is the minimum number of days in one city? And what is the maximum number of days in one city? Okay, so 3 months, are you looking for 1 month in France and 2 months in Italy? We did determine that there was a family member in Rome. And so I said to myself, okay, here's an idea. If hypothetically you're looking, the time frame was the month April, May, and June. In reality, you could fly into Rome, forewarn your family member or cousin of this anxiety issue, and just have her agree to pay her, have her pick you up, bring you right where you're going, do everything to just calm you, to get you into that environment at the hotel, although Rome's a little bit sometimes rough with a lot of stimulation, so that could be a different story. But have a family member pick you up in Rome, a cousin, and then you spend a little bit or how much time you wanted there getting acclimated, and then you move up to Paris. Because if you come into Rome in April versus you come into Paris in April, Paris will be far colder, Rome will be warmer. So if you start down here and you start April, May, June, by the time you get up there, you will find that Northern Italy and France will be warmer in the second half of May and June, versus if you start there, it's chillier, and then you come down and it's warmer. So that was another recommendation that I had made, and that there needed to be, there's the cousin picking her up in Rome, and family obviously picking her up in Canada. Okay. This was a 45-minute consult that I gave her, free, courtesy, to work through these issues. Because the truth is, I really don't want to have someone hire me unless I got a sense of your personality, and I honestly believe I could add value. So what's going to happen is she's got enough things to start with. Because of the fear, she could not even get to look on the phone to see if there was direct flights, how much they cost. She didn't want to do it. I said, that's fine. Let me do it. So while we sat on the phone, I said, okay, where are you flying out of? This, listen to her. I said, here we go. You got direct flights. You got night flights. The prices are, I forget, it was $4,500 for business class and maybe $1,600 for second class. I personally, without somebody accompanying her, I don't see second class being the best choice. She wanted second class because she felt that the people around her could comfort her. And I'm like, You think strangers today are really going to give a rat's ASS? And then they're going to be, even if you try to sleep, you can't sleep. And so if you take a medication to knock you out, they're going to be climbing over you. I just said, that's not my recommendation. Knowing that you've got an issue, your best is first class, which is business class. So those are some of the things in terms of, my mom used to call it the Ben Franklin pros and cons. And you just list it out, and you try to keep moving things to the resolve side of the list. And then you get a new piece of paper and then put down what is the to be addressed. And over time, as you start making decisions, more and more of it will be moved over. But she desperately wants to do this, but she can't bring herself to buy the ticket. And so that was the other thing I said, is that she obviously needs to go to a travel agent. She can eliminate that anxiety of buying the ticket, but she needs to be extremely clear that if we work together, do another 3 hours, over, not 1 hour per time, or 45 minutes per pop, breaking up the 3 hours. I'll give her the homework and I'll start pulling out of her the information and then organizing it. So anyway, that's where that was. I wanted to share that with you. I have some other things too. And now that my girls are gone, although they both have been sick, my oldest one is very sick. My granddaughter's been sick. Knock on wood. I've gotten a little bit of a sore throat, but grandma's good. But I kept them not breathing, coughing, and eating off of my silverware. Okay, bye, you guys.